The stars trembled as 10,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. The Vorith Dominion had arrived, and they had come to end humanity forever. Supreme Commander Cathrell stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching Earth appear on his view screen. The small blue planet looked peaceful from this distance. Fragile. He had studied this world for many years, and he knew everything about the creatures who lived there. They were primitive, divided, weak. They would fall like all the others. His second officer, a tall female named Versha, approached with a data tablet. She bowed her head in respect before speaking. "Commander, we have completed our final analysis of the human species. Their military capabilities remain unchanged from our last survey. Projectile weapons, chemical explosives, primitive spacecraft that cannot leave their own solar system. They pose no threat to our forces." Cathrell nodded slowly. His gray skin stretched tight over his skull as he smiled. The Vorith had conquered 200 worlds using the same method every time. They studied their targets for years, learned every weakness, and then struck with overwhelming power. No species had ever survived their approach. Humanity would be no different. "Send the ultimatum," he ordered. "Give them 72 hours to surrender. Not that it matters. They will fight, and they will die." The message was broadcast to every device on Earth. Television screens flickered. Phones buzzed. Computers displayed the alien face of Commander Cathrell as he delivered his warning. "People of Earth," he said in a voice that had been translated into every human language, "you have been judged. The Vorith Dominion claims this world. You have 72 hours to surrender completely. If you refuse, we will end your species. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. Choose wisely." Across the planet, panic seemed to erupt. News channels showed crowds running through streets. World leaders gave speeches calling for calm. Military forces mobilized in obvious, predictable patterns. Cathrell watched it all with satisfaction. The humans were behaving exactly as expected, but behind closed doors, something very different was happening, in a secure bunker beneath the mountains of Switzerland. The real leaders of Earth gathered around a massive holographic display. There were no arguments, no debates, no politicians fighting for power. These men and women had been preparing for this moment for 40 years. General Sophia Okonkwo stood at the center of the room. She was a tall woman with gray hair and steady hands. Her dark eyes showed no fear as she studied the alien fleet on the display. She had waited her entire career for this day. "Protocol Nightfall is active," she announced. "All stations report ready." She paused and looked around at her colleagues from every nation on Earth. "They did exactly what we expected. They think we are afraid." A Chinese general named Chen Wei nodded. "The evacuation is proceeding on schedule. The aliens are watching our cities empty. They believe we are running in panic." "Let them believe it," Sophia replied. "Every assumption they make is a weapon we can use against them." The truth was something the Vorith could never have imagined. 40 years ago, a small Vorith scout ship had crashed in a remote region of Siberia. The Russian government had recovered it in secret and shared their discovery with the other major powers. Inside that ship, they found something that changed everything: star maps, technology, and most importantly, detailed files about the Vorith Dominion and how they conquered worlds. Humanity learned that the Vorith had been watching Earth for centuries. They learned that invasion was coming, and they made a choice that no species had ever made before. Instead of preparing obvious defenses that the Vorith would detect and plan against, humanity decided to hide. They would appear weak while building strength in secret. For 4 decades, the nations of Earth worked together on the greatest deception in history. Their visible militaries remained primitive on purpose. Old tanks, outdated aircraft, rockets that looked impressive, but were nothing compared to what they had truly developed. Meanwhile, the real weapons were built underground, underwater, and in orbit disguised as space debris. The cities that now appeared too empty in panic were actually executing carefully rehearsed evacuation plans. Millions of people moved through underground tunnels to shelter cities that had been constructed in secret. These bunkers had schools, hospitals, parks, and homes. Children played in artificial sunlight while their parents waited calmly. They had practiced this many times. On the surface, everything looked like chaos. The Voreth surveillance systems recorded humans running, crying, and fighting each other for resources. What they did not see were the smiles hidden behind the masks of fear. What they did not detect were the weapons powering up beneath the ground. What they could not imagine was that humanity had read their playbook and written a counter-strategy for every page. Commander. Cathrell watched the evacuation with amusement. "Versha," he said, "look at them scatter like insects. This is why the Voreth rule the galaxy. Lesser species cannot stand against true power." Versha nodded, but something troubled her. "Commander, I am detecting some unusual patterns in their evacuation. The movement seems almost coordinated." Cathrell waved his hand dismissively. "They are simply following their primitive instincts. When prey animals sense danger, they run. There is nothing unusual about it." But deep in her mind, Versha wondered. She had studied many species before their conquest, and something about this one felt different. Their panic was too organized. Their chaos was too perfect in the Swiss bunker. General Okonkwo received word that 90% of the population had reached safe zones. The surface was nearly empty. The trap was nearly set. She allowed herself a small smile. For 40 years, she had carried this secret. For 40 years, she had watched humanity pretend to be weak while growing stronger than ever. Now, at last, they would show the galaxy what they truly were. A young officer approached her station. "General, the Voreth are launching their first attack wave. 500 dropships heading for our military bases." Sophia nodded. "Let them come. Activate our surface defenses. Make sure we miss." The officer looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned in his eyes. "Of course, General, we need them to believe we are trying." "Exactly," Sophia replied. "We need them on the ground. We need them confident. And most importantly, we need them surprised. High above Earth." Commander Cathrell watched his dropships descend toward the planet. In a few hours, his soldiers would secure the major military targets. In a few days, humanity would surrender. In a few weeks, Earth would be another trophy in the Dominion's collection. He had no idea that he was walking into the most elaborate trap ever designed. He had no idea that every step of his invasion had been predicted and planned for. And he had no idea that the species he considered primitive had just one message waiting for him. "Thank you for landing." They prepared humanity's extinction, but walked straight into Earth's perfect ambush. Part 2, Commander. Cathrell stood on his bridge and watched the data streams pour in from the planet below. His 500 dropships had entered Earth's atmosphere without resistance. The primitive missiles that humans launched had missed by wide margins. Their aircraft had scattered like frightened birds. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. "The cities are empty," Commander Versha reported. "The humans have fled to rural areas and underground shelters. Our ground forces are landing at military installations now." Cathrell nodded with satisfaction. Typical prey behavior. They run and hide, hoping the predator will lose interest. But the Voreth never lose interest. Begin the occupation. Secure all military assets and communication centers. Across Earth's surface, Voreth soldiers poured out of their dropships. They wore heavy armor that could stop any human bullet. They carried energy weapons that could cut through steel. They moved with the confidence of warriors who had never lost a battle. But something strange was happening. The military bases they captured were empty. Not just evacuated, but completely stripped. No weapons. No vehicles. No useful technology. Just empty buildings and abandoned equipment that looked decades old. A Voreth squad leader named Thelvas walked through an American military base with growing confusion. "This makes no sense," he said to his squad. "Where are their weapons? Where are their soldiers? This place looks like it was abandoned years ago. Perhaps they knew we were coming," one of his soldiers suggested. "They took everything valuable and ran." Thelvas shook his head. No species runs that efficiently. This is strange. He did not know how right he was. 2 miles beneath the Swiss Alps. General Sophia Okonkwo watched the invasion unfold on her holographic display. Each red dot represented a Vorth landing zone. Each blue dot represented a hidden human defense position. The aliens had landed exactly where she wanted them. She thought about the journey that had brought humanity to this moment. 40 years ago, when the Vorth scout ship crashed, the world had faced a choice. Some leaders wanted to announce the discovery and begin building obvious defenses. Others wanted to attack the Vorth before they could invade. But Sophia, then a young military strategist, had proposed something different. We cannot outfight them with brute force, she had argued to the Secret Council. Their technology is too advanced. Their fleet is too large. But we can outthink them. We can study them the same way they study us. We can learn their patterns and their weaknesses. And we can prepare a trap that they will never see coming. The Council had listened. For the first time in human history, every major nation agreed to work together in secret. They created a hidden government that operated beneath the visible one. They developed technology and underground facilities that no satellite could detect. They trained soldiers who officially did not exist, and they waited. The hardest part was appearing weak. Human scientists developed energy weapons, but kept them hidden. Human engineers built spacecraft, but disguised them as space debris. Human military leaders deliberately kept their visible forces primitive, using outdated equipment and predictable tactics. Every action was designed to match what the Vorth expected to see. Now, watching the aliens walk into her carefully prepared kill zones, Sophia allowed herself to feel a moment of pride. 40 years of patience. 40 years of deception. 40 years of unity and sacrifice. It was time to show the Vorth what humanity was truly capable of. General, a young officer called out, "The Vorth have occupied 80% of our designated target zones. Ground forces are spreading out to search for survivors." Sophia nodded slowly. "What is the status of our underground shelters?" "All civilian populations are secure. Morale is high. Everyone knows what comes next." In the shelter cities beneath Earth's surface, millions of people waited. Children attended school in classrooms carved from rock. Families ate dinner in communal halls lit by artificial sunlight. Old men and women told stories about the world above and the day they would return to it. The shelters were not just hiding places. They were complete cities with hospitals, factories, and farms. Humanity had spent 40 years building a civilization underground that could survive anything happening on the surface. They had prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. A young girl named Maya sat with her grandmother. In their small apartment, she watched the news feed that showed Vorth soldiers marching through empty streets above. "Are the aliens going to hurt us?" she asked. Her grandmother smiled and took her hand. "No, child. We have been getting ready for them for a very long time. Soon, they will learn that humans are not as weak as they think." On the Vorth flagship, Commander Kethrel received a troubling report. "Our ground forces have secured all primary targets," Versha said, "but they have found nothing of value. The technology in these bases is primitive beyond explanation. Some equipment appears to be from decades past." Kethrel frowned. "That is strange. Our surveillance showed them using more advanced systems. Perhaps they hid their best weapons," Versha suggested. "Where?" Kethrel demanded. "We have mapped every facility on this planet. There is nowhere they could hide significant military assets without our detection." But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his mind. Something about this invasion felt wrong. The humans were behaving exactly as predicted, but that very perfection was suspicious. In his 300 years of conquest, Kethrel had never seen a species match expectations so precisely. Then the message arrived. "Commander," Versha said, her voice uncertain, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet. It is addressed directly to you." Kethrel straightened in his chair. "Put it through." A human face appeared on his view screen. It was a woman with dark skin and gray hair. Her eyes were calm and steady. She smiled, but there was no fear in it, There was no surrender, Commander Cathrell, she said. My name is General Sophia Okonkwo. On behalf of the people of Earth, I want to thank you. Cathrell leaned forward, confused. Thank me? For what? For landing, Sophia replied. We have been waiting 40 years for you to put your soldiers on our ground. Now that you have, I want you to know something. Everything you think you know about humanity is wrong. Every weakness you detected was a lie. Every primitive weapon was a prop. You walked into our trap, Commander, and now it is time to close it. The transmission ended. Cathrell sat in stunned silence. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Then the first explosions began. Across Earth's surface, the ground beneath 1,000 Vorith positions opened simultaneously. Hidden doors revealed weapons that no alien surveillance had detected. Soldiers who had been waiting in secret for decades emerged from tunnels, and the species that the Vorith had marked for extinction began to fight back. The perfect ambush had begun. They prepared humanity's extinction, but walked straight into Earth's perfect ambush, Part 3. The ground exploded beneath Thelvas and his squad. One moment they were searching an abandoned military base. The next moment the concrete floor split open and fire erupted from below. 3 of his soldiers vanished in the blast before they could even scream. Thelvas threw himself behind a wall as chaos erupted around him. His armor's shields flickered and died. His communication system filled with static. His weapon, which should have been able to cut through anything, suddenly felt useless in his hands. What is happening? He shouted into his communicator. Command, respond. We are under attack. No response came. The humans had somehow jammed every Vorith frequency. 300 years of military technology. And they were suddenly as blind and deaf as primitive creatures. From the holes in the ground, human soldiers emerged. They wore black armor that Thelvas did not recognize. They carried weapons that glowed with energy signatures that should not exist on this primitive world. And they moved with the precision of warriors who had trained for this exact moment. Thelvas raised his weapon. But before he could fire, an electromagnetic pulse washed over his position. His armor locked up. His weapon died in his hands. He stood frozen as a human soldier approached him, rifle aimed at his chest. The human did not fire. Instead, she spoke in perfect Vorith language. Surrender, and you will not be harmed. We do not wish to kill those who choose to live. Thelvas stared at her in shock. Humans could not speak Vorith. Humans did not have energy weapons. Humans were primitive creatures who should have been crushed in hours. Yet here was a human offering him mercy in his own tongue. He dropped his useless weapon and raised his hands. Across Earth, the same scene repeated itself 1,000 times. Hidden doors opened in mountains, forests, deserts, and cities. Underground bunkers revealed weapon systems that had been built in secret for 40 years. Human soldiers emerged from hiding places that no Vorith scanner had detected. The technology they used was remarkable. Some of it was human invention developed by scientists working in hidden laboratories, but much of it was based on the crashed Vorith scout ship that humanity had recovered 4 decades ago. Human engineers had studied that ship piece by piece, learning its secrets and improving upon them. On the Vorith flagship, Commander Carell watched his invasion collapse in real time. Red warning lights flashed across his tactical display. Communication with ground forces had been lost. Entire battalions were being wiped out or captured. The primitive species he had come to conquer was destroying his army. This is impossible, he whispered. How can they have this technology? Our surveillance showed them decades behind us. Versha worked frantically at her console, trying to restore communications. Commander, I am detecting energy signatures from the human weapons. She paused, her face going pale. They match Vorith designs. Modified and improved, but definitely based on our technology. Cathrall felt his blood run cold. The scout ship, he said. The one we lost 40 years ago? We assumed it crashed in deep ocean. We assumed it was destroyed. They found it, Versha replied. They found it, and they learned from it. In the Swiss bunker, General Sophia Okonkwo coordinated the counterattack with calm efficiency. Every order she gave had been planned years in advance. Every response our forces made had been rehearsed hundreds of times. The Vorith were fighting against 40 years of preparation, and they were losing. Ground phase complete, her tactical officer reported. 70% of enemy forces neutralized. 20% captured. 10% in retreat. Sophia nodded. Begin orbital activation. It is time to show them what else we have been building high above Earth. Among the thousands of pieces of space debris that orbited the planet, something began to wake up. What looked like dead satellites and broken rocket stages were actually weapons platforms that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. They powered up one by one, revealing targeting systems, energy cannons, and missile launchers. Commander Cathrell watched in horror as his sensors detected the threat. There are weapons everywhere, Versha said, her voice trembling. They hid them in the debris field. We scanned this system for years and never detected them. The orbital platforms opened fire. Precise strikes hit Voreth ships before they could raise shields. Energy beams cut through armor that had never been breached. Missiles guided by human intelligence found weak points that Voreth engineers had never imagined anyone would discover. Kethril gripped his command chair as his flagship shook from multiple impacts. All ships, defensive formation, he ordered. Return fire on those platforms. But the human weapons were too well hidden and too numerous. For every platform his ships destroyed, 3 more revealed themselves. The debris field that he had ignored as worthless junk was actually the most sophisticated defense network in the galaxy. On the planet below, Thelva sat in a human holding area with dozens of other captured Voreth soldiers. They had been disarmed, but not harmed. Human medics were treating their wounded. Human soldiers offered them water and food. Thelvas could not understand it. In 300 years of Voreth conquest, they had never taken prisoners. Defeated enemies were eliminated. That was the way of the Dominion. Yet these humans, who had every reason to hate the invaders, were showing mercy. A human officer approached him. She was young, with kind eyes that seemed strange on a soldier's face. "You are confused," she said in Voreth. Thelvas nodded slowly. "Why do you not kill us?" "We came to destroy you," the officer smiled. "Because we are not like you. We defend our home, but we do not become monsters to do it. Every life has value, even the lives of those who would take ours." Thelvas looked at the other prisoners, who were listening with equal confusion. "Your people are strange," he said. "No," the officer replied. "We are human. This is who we choose to be." Back on the flagship, Cathrell faced a terrible decision. His ground forces were destroyed. His fleet was under heavy attack. The species he had come to exterminate was proving to be far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. "Commander," Richer said urgently, "I am detecting new contacts emerging from behind Earth's moon." She paused, checking her readings twice. "They are ships, Commander. Human ships. Hundreds of them." Kethril stared at the display in disbelief. The primitives had not only built hidden defenses, they had built a hidden fleet. And that fleet was now moving to block his only escape route. General Sophie Okonkwo's voice came through on an open channel. "Commander Kethril," she said calmly, "you are surrounded. Your ground forces have fallen. Your fleet is damaged, and your path to hyperspace is blocked. I suggest you consider your next move very carefully." Kethril looked at the tactical display. Red enemy markers surrounded his position. His proud armada, which had conquered 200 worlds, was trapped by a species he had dismissed as prey for the first time in 300 years. The supreme commander of the Voreth Dominion did not know what to do. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey had become something far more dangerous. They prepared humanity's extinction, but walked straight into Earth's perfect ambush part, for Supreme Commander Cathrell stood alone on his bridge. Surrounded by the flashing lights of damage reports and the sound of distant explosions, in 300 years of military service, he had never known defeat. He had conquered civilizations that spanned star systems. He had crushed armies that outnumbered his forces 10 to 1. But now, trapped in the orbit of a small blue planet, He felt something he had not experienced since childhood. "Fear, Commander?" Versha said, her voice strained. "The human fleet is engaging our rear guard. They are cutting off our retreat to the hyperspace jump point." On the tactical display, Kethro watched the battle unfold. Human ships moved with surprising coordination, striking weak points in his formation and retreating before his weapons could lock on. They were smaller than Vorath warships, but they were fast and clever. More importantly, they knew this system perfectly. Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of debris was a weapon in their hands. "How is this possible?" Kethril demanded. "We surveyed this system for decades. Where did they hide these ships?" Bersha shook her head. "Our sensors never detected construction facilities capable of building a fleet. They must have done it underground, or in deep space locations we never monitored." She paused, studying her data. "Commander, the human tactics are unlike anything in our database. They are adapting to our maneuvers in real time, changing their approach with every engagement." Kethrel understood what she meant. Vorath's military doctrine was based on centuries of refinement. Every tactic was tested and proven. Every response was calculated and predictable. But the humans did not follow rules. They invented new strategies on the spot, responding to situations with creativity that Vorath commanders could not match. A human squadron swept past the flagship, firing precise bursts at the engine section before vanishing behind a nearby moon. Another group emerged from the asteroid belt, launching missiles at supply ships before retreating into cover. It was not warfare as Kethrel understood it. It was chaos with purpose, in the holding area on Earth. Thelvas watched a human news broadcast with other captured soldiers. The screen showed images of the space battle above, but the coverage was not what he expected. There was no celebration of enemy deaths, no cheering for destruction. Instead, the human commentator spoke about the hope for a peaceful resolution and the desire to minimize casualties on both sides. "What troubles you?" she asked Thelvas, pointed at the screen. "Your people are winning, yet they speak of peace instead of victory. Why?" The guard considered the question. "Because victory without peace means nothing. We did not build our defenses to destroy your people. We built them to protect our home. There is a difference." Thelvas thought about the 200 worlds the Vorath had conquered. None of those species had been offered mercy. None had been given a choice. The Dominion simply took what it wanted and eliminated resistance. For the first time, he wondered if there was another way in the Swiss bunker. General Sophia Okonkwo monitored the space battle while her staff coordinated Earth's defense forces. The fight was going well, but she knew that Commander Kethrel still had options. A desperate enemy was a dangerous enemy. "General," her tactical officer reported, "the Vorath flagship is breaking from formation. It appears to be heading directly toward Earth with a dozen escort ships." Sophia studied the trajectory. Kethrel was attempting a direct strike on the planet itself. If he could threaten Earth's population, he might force a surrender or at least create chaos in human command. It was a predictable move. She had planned for it. "Activate final defense layer," she ordered. "Show the commander what happens when you threaten our home." Across the solar system, hidden weapons revealed themselves. On the dark side of the moon, massive energy cannons powered up, their targeting systems locking onto the Vorath strike force. On Mars, orbital platforms that had been disguised as scientific stations deployed their true armaments. In the asteroid belt, mining equipment transformed into missile launchers. Kethral's strike force flew into a crossfire that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Energy beams converged on his escort ships, overwhelming their shields within seconds. Missiles tracked his flagship with guidance systems that anticipated every evasive maneuver. The commander watched his escort ships explode one by one. His flagship's shields flickered and failed. His weapon systems went offline. In minutes, his desperate attack had been reduced to a crippled ship drifting helplessly toward the planet he had come to conquer. "Commander," Rashaw said quietly, "our main fleet reports 50% losses. The remaining ships are requesting permission to surrender." Kethrel closed his eyes. 300 years of victories ended by a species he had dismissed as primitive. His entire understanding of the galaxy had been proven wrong. Humanity was not weak. They had simply chosen to appear weak while they prepared the greatest ambush in history. General Okonkwo's voice came through the communication system. "Commander Kethrel," she said, "your fleet is defeated. Your ground forces have surrendered. Your flagship is disabled. But I want you to know that we do not seek your destruction." Kethrel opened his eyes. "What do you want?" "The same thing we have always wanted, to be left alone, to live in peace. But we know that is not possible as long as the Vorith Dominion continues its conquests. So we offer you something different. We offer you a choice." Versha looked at her commander with uncertainty. She had never heard of a conquered species offering choices to their conquerors. The concept went against everything the Vorith believed. "We can destroy your remaining ships," Sophia continued. "We have the power to do so, and some would say we have the right. But we will not. Instead, we offer surrender terms that allow your soldiers to return home with honor. We offer peace instead of annihilation. We offer a new relationship between our peoples based on respect instead of domination." "Why?" Kethrel asked, genuinely confused. "You have one. Why show mercy to those who came to destroy you?" There was a pause before Sophia answered. "Because we want to change the galaxy, Commander. Not through conquest, but through example. If we become what you are, we lose something more important than any battle. We lose who we are." Kethrel looked at his damaged bridge, his wounded crew, his defeated fleet. He thought about the 200 worlds the Vorith had conquered and the billions of lives they had ended. He thought about the human soldiers who treated captured enemies with kindness. He thought about what it might mean if there was truly another way. His hand hovered over the self-destruct control. Part of him wanted to die with honor, to end his career in fire rather than surrender. But another part, a part he had ignored for 3 centuries, wondered what would happen if he chose differently, Commander. Versha said softly, "The crew awaits your orders." Kethrel looked at her. Then, at the planet below, where a species he had underestimated had just taught him the most important lesson of his life. Strength was not just about weapons and conquest. True strength was having the power to destroy and choosing not to use it. His hand moved away from the self-destruct control. "Open a channel to General Okonkwo," he said quietly. "Tell her we accept her terms." For the first time in Vorith history, Supreme Commander surrendered to a species he had been sent to exterminate. And the galaxy would never be the same. They prepared humanity's extinction. But walked straight into Earth's perfect ambush. Part 5, the surrender ceremony took place on the steps of the United Nations building in New York City. It was a warm spring morning, and millions of people had gathered in the streets and parks to witness history. Above them, the remains of the Vorith fleet hung in orbit, their weapons silent, their crews waiting to learn their fate. Commander Kethrel walked slowly toward the podium where General Sophia Okonkwo waited. His gray skin looked pale under Earth's yellow sun. His uniform, once decorated with medals from 200 conquests, now felt heavy on his shoulders. Behind him, Versha and a small group of officers followed in silence. The crowd did not jeer or curse at them. They simply watched, curious about these aliens who had come to destroy them and had found something unexpected instead. Some people held signs calling for peace. Others held flowers, an Earth tradition that Kethrel did not understand but found strangely moving. He stopped before Sophia and bowed his head. "In the name of the Vorith Dominion, I surrender our forces to the people of Earth." Sophia nodded with dignity. "We accept your surrender, Commander, but we do not accept it as conquerors. We accept it as the first step toward something new." She gestured to a document on the podium between them. "This is not a treaty of domination," she explained. "It is a proposal for alliance. We do not wish to rule over the Vorith, or take revenge for your invasion. We wish to show the galaxy that there is another way." Kethrel looked at the document with confusion. He had prepared himself for harsh terms. For punishment, for the humiliation that the Vorith always inflicted on defeated enemies. But this was something else entirely. "Why?" he asked. "We came to end your species. We would have shown you no mercy. Why do you offer us this?" Sophia smiled gently. "Because we are not you, and because we believe you can become something better than what you have been." In the months that followed, the galaxy watched in amazement as humanity did exactly what they had promised. Vorith prisoners were treated with respect and eventually returned to their homeworld. Damaged ships were repaired rather than destroyed. Cultural exchanges began between human and Vorith scholars, each learning about the other's history and traditions. Thelva's, the young soldier who had been captured in the first hours of the invasion, chose to remain on Earth as part of a diplomatic mission. He had expected to die in the invasion. Instead, he found himself walking through human cities, eating human food, learning human languages. The creatures he had been taught to despise became his teachers and eventually his friends. One afternoon, he sat in a park in Tokyo with a human child who had been teaching him to fly a kite. The paper construction danced in the wind while cherry blossoms fell around them like pink snow. Elvis thought about all the worlds the Vorith had destroyed and wondered how many moments like this had been lost forever. "Your people are remarkable," he told the child's mother, who sat nearby. "We came to destroy you, and you responded with kindness. I do not understand it, but I am grateful for it." The mother smiled. "We spent 40 years preparing for war," she said. "But we always hoped we would not have to fight. The best victory is one where everyone survives to become friends." Commander Kethril returned to the Vorith homeworld carrying a message that would shake the Dominion to its foundation. He told the High Council about Earth's hidden strength, but he also told them about something more important. He told them about mercy, about choice, about a species that had the power to destroy its enemies and chose not to. The council was divided. Some wanted to send a larger fleet to finish what Kethril had failed to accomplish. But others listened to his words and began to question everything they had believed for centuries. Was conquest truly the only way? Was domination truly strength? 1 year after the invasion, the first Vorith ambassador arrived on Earth. His name was Kethril. The same commander who had come to destroy humanity now came to build something new. He walked down the steps of his shuttle and was greeted by General Sophia Okonkwo, who had become the leader of Earth's new Interstellar Relations Council. "Welcome back, Commander," she said. "Though I suppose I should call you Ambassador now?" Kethril smiled, an expression that had once been rare on his face. "I have thought much about your words during our battle," he said. "You told me that strength is not just about weapons and conquest. I believe I am beginning to understand what you meant." They walked together through a garden that had been planted to symbolize the new relationship between their peoples. Vorith crystal trees grew alongside earth oaks. Alien flowers bloomed next to human roses. It was strange and beautiful, 2 worlds growing together. In the garden, children from both species played together. Young Vorith and young humans chased each other through the paths, laughing in their different languages but understanding each other perfectly. Thelvas watched them with wonder, thinking about how different this was from everything he had been taught. General Okonkwo stopped at a bench and sat down, inviting Kethril to join her. "The galaxy is watching," she said. "Word of what happened here has spread to every corner of known space. Species that the Vorith conquered are asking questions they never dared to ask before." Kethril nodded slowly. "The High Council is afraid. They believe that if conquered worlds see that resistance is possible, rebellion will follow." "And what do you believe?" Sophia asked. Kethril watched the children playing. He thought about all his years of conquest, all the lives he had taken, all the civilizations he had ended. Then he thought about this moment, sitting in a garden with a former enemy, watching the future play together without fear. "I believe that humanity has shown us something we needed to see," he said. "That there is another way to be strong. That power can be used to build instead of destroy. That enemies can become allies if given the chance." Sophia placed her hand on his arm, a gesture of friendship that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "That was always our hope," she said. "It's not just to survive, but to change things. To prove that the cycle of conquest and domination could be broken." Across the galaxy, the story of Earth spread like wildfire. A primitive species had faced the mighty Vorith and not only survived, but shown them a different path. Other conquered worlds began to whisper about resistance, about hope, about a small blue planet that had refused to accept extinction. The Vorith Dominion, which had ruled through fear for 1,000 years, found itself facing questions it had never considered. If humanity could stand against them and then show mercy, what did that say about the Vorith way of life? What did it mean to be strong if strength could take so many forms? General Sophia Okonkwo retired from military service 2 years after the invasion. Her last official act was to dedicate a memorial to all those who had kept humanity's secret for 40 years, who had built the defenses and maintained the deception and believed that their children would one day live in a better galaxy. The memorial stood in Geneva, a simple stone structure with words carved in every human language and in Vorith script as well. It read, "We prepared for war so that we could choose peace. We built weapons so that we would never need to use them. Showed mercy so that mercy would spread." On the day of the dedication, Uthrel stood beside Sophia as she spoke to the crowd. Thelvis was there too, now serving as a bridge between their peoples. Around them, humans and Vorith stood together, looking up at the memorial and thinking about what it meant. Humanity had walked into the stars not as conquerors, but as examples. They had proven that the strongest choice was not always the violent one. They had shown that 40 years of patience could change the course of history. And somewhere in the galaxy, on worlds the Voroth had once ruled without question, beings looked up at the stars and whispered a new word: hope. The ambush had never been about destruction. It had been about transformation. And as the years passed, more and more species joined the alliance that humanity had started. The old ways of conquest began to fade, replaced by something better, something kinder, something that a small blue planet had proven was possible. The Vorith had prepared humanity's extinction, but they had walked straight into something far more powerful than any weapon. They had walked into the beginning of a new galaxy.